Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to the Hebrew Woman Show. I am your host, Renaissance Woman, aka Ren Judah, and we are back. And listen, I know I have gotten off schedule here, and I just want you to know that there are a lot of significant changes going on too across all of our platforms. And so, I'm just getting myself in sync here, but I hope you all are having a restful Sabbath. And today we're going to pick back up on the Maxwell series. However, I do want to note a bit of scheduling change. Starting next week, we're going to continue finishing the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. However, we're going to do that on Fridays. And then on the Sabbath morning, we're going to pick up with lessons in leadership. And that we'll discuss what we learned from the chapter the previous day, or some things that are going on in current events, or things that which I just think are relative and important, pertinent to us doing the purpose of this channel is for us to explore our biblical principles. And that being said, let's get to our normal slideshow. And this is the last time you will see this slideshow in this form, okay? So, and as I just stated, the purpose of this channel is for us to explore our biblical principles. For me, this is not just about, this is me doing my reflection and my work for the Most High. This is where I come and I just share my experiences with you all, and hopefully you get something about it because out of it. Because the purpose of this is for us to examine ourselves. 2 Corinthians 13:5 says that we should examine ourselves. We should know whether we are in the faith. It says, "Examine yourselves, whether ye be in the faith. Prove your own selves. Know you not your own selves how Christ is in you, except ye be reprobate." Trying to think and talk at the same time. Listen, I could cover these same scriptures every show for a reason, because one of the things that I think should happen, and I don't always do, is I'm trying to establish a rhythm of journaling and self-reflecting at the end of the day. Because I think if you don't, you'll find yourself literally repeating the same mistakes over and over and over and again. And so the purpose of self-reflection is not for you to go into a session of self-flagellation. It is for you to take the time to be introspective and thoughtful, and think about, how could I have done this differently? What could I have done different? And if I'm going to share my growth and my lessons with other women and other people, what does that look like? Because if you're not learning anything, you're not teaching anything. We strive here to be women of Titus, and we want to be teachers of good things. And I think one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to really do a deep dive into these scriptures, so I can really break down to you why I share these and why these scriptures for me are foundational and part of our intro every time we do the show, and what it means to train ourselves to think biblically and not emotionally. It has nothing to do with your not having emotions, and everything to do with about what principles are guiding you. What is your foundation? Are you following the law, statutes, and commandments? And if you are, how are they showing up? Or who are you surrounding yourself with? Are you an island? Are you operating without having wise counsel? Because Proverbs 19:20 tells us to hear counsel and receive instruction, that thou may be wise in thy latter end. So if you don't have people around you who can get you together when you're tripping, right? Who can give you sound advice and reason with you and walk with you, then that is something you need to work on. You need to build your I believe my one of my colleagues used to call it a board of directors when I went through Focus of St. Louis. That's right. Uh, Shayla said that you should build a board, your own personal board of directors. I agree with that premise, because that if you don't have people who can tell you the truth, you're going to fail every time. You just are. You need to be able to have people around you who care enough about you. I think we are in a time where people lie so much. It's hard to get people to tell you the truth, because most of the time, a lot of these people are operating based on their own needs and their own aims and angles, that they don't have time to tell you the truth in their minds. They don't want to be bothered with it. So Proverbs 11:14 says, "Where there is no counsel, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety." So if you don't have wise counsel, you don't have people around you, there's no safety there because you can't see everything. You can't see all around you. You need somebody to watch your six. And First John 4:1, we need to have we talk about discretion and discernment. First John 4:1 said, Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world. So if you're just walking around here and people can just tell you anything and you just believe it, you could click on any YouTube channel or read any article, and just because you read it, you think that's a fact. That's a problem. You need to try the spirit, meaning you need to vet your sources. Okay? And that includes me. You try what I'm saying. You don't just read what I say or listen to what I say on here. You go read the scriptures for yourself. You go find out these things for yourself. You email me and say, hey, Ren, can you send me that article you were talking about or that news story so I can research it? Do your own due diligence. And we will continue with When Decency Disappears, because for me, that is what this is all about. Now I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and dive into our chapter without further ado. I do believe we're on chapter 5. Leadership law number 5, and that is the law of addition. And so I would say a simple question for you and for me is to just think when we show up, whether it's at home, at work, wherever you are, do you leave the place better than you found it? Do you make the people around you better? Do you add value or do you drain value? You know if you're an energy vampire or if all you do is take, take, take. Nobody has to tell you that you're a user. You know. So do you add value? And especially if you are in a leadership position and you have children, you should be adding value to their lives. And even as a friend, you should be adding value to your friends' lives. As a wife, you should be adding value to your husband. Okay. So that's just one of the questions that I think we should think about today as we navigate this chapter. Just think about, how do you show up? And listen, anybody can get a leadership title. Anybody can be a supervisor. Anybody can get a position. Anybody can sit in a seat of authority. But can you change the team? Can you change the lives of the people around you? Do you touch people when you show up? Or are they like, oh, hell, here she comes again? So that's just something that I have to think about. So anyway, let me go ahead and we'll get into the stream, y'all. Let me add our chapter here. Let's go.
Leadership law number 5, the law of addition. Leaders add value by serving others. In a world where many political leaders enjoy their power and prestige, and where CEOs of large corporations make astronomical incomes, work and live in luxury, and appear to be most concerned with what's in it for them, Jim Sinegal was an oddity. Sinegal is the co-founder and former CEO of Costco, one of the largest retailers in the world, and an organization that regularly ranks near the top as a best brand, admired company, and respected retailer. He retired in 2012. While he was CEO, Sinegal didn't seem much interested in the perks of leadership. He worked in an unremarkable office comprised primarily of folding tables and chairs. If he invited people to meet him at the corporate offices, he went down to the lobby himself to meet them. He answered his own phone, and the salary he took was modest, a third of the average CEO's salary during his tenure. Sinegal's path to corporate leadership wasn't typical either. He didn't attend an Ivy League school. He wasn't a lawyer or a CPA. As a teenager, he thought of becoming a doctor, but his high school grades were less than stellar. So he went off to a community college and earned an associate degree. While he was
and let's just be honest, most people, they're not showing up to and being selfless when it comes to taking on positions. They're not taking less money. They're not going to really go into I just listening to him describe him, it just lets you know that this man went into this job with a perspective of stewardship.
Attending San Diego State College, now university, he helped a friend unload mattresses at a new local retail store called FedMart. What he expected to be one day of work turned into a regular job. When he received a promotion, he discontinued his studies. He had found his career and mentor, Sol Price, FedMart's chairman. Under Price's guidance, Senegal rose to the post of executive vice president for merchandising.
And so I wanted to point that out too with when he's talking about Senegal. Like everybody, I have some college, and so I just say, Jill and I, we were talking about this the last show. Sometimes people find their niche and they don't, and maybe you go back and you finish your degree later but there are people, and I just think I noticed that whenever somebody rises to prominence and they don't have a degree, unless they are, they meet certain physical attributes, they don't get questioned. And I can just say it from my personal experience as a Black woman, showing up without a degree and being promoted the way I was, there was constantly questions and just nitpicking and do you belong here? And so you always have to show up better and go the extra mile. You always have to exceed expectations. You can't show up mediocre. And then in that, we were just talking about that leads to jealousy and intimidation and people feeling threatened by you. So there are challenges no matter how you get where you're going, whether you're degreed or not. Because even with a degree, I'm just in these spaces and watching other Black women deal with the struggles that we deal with in these spaces, in workspaces. It can really be something. And I just noticed that for me personally, I think a lot of times you don't see men have to deal with that to the extent that I think Black women do. And this is something, if you want to challenge me on it or you want to have a conversation about it, shoot me an email at sister7@gmail.com. I would love to have a discussion.
Senegal later helped Price found Price Club and then went on to co-found Costco in 1983 with Jeffrey H. Brotman. The company's growth was rapid and Costco purchased and merged with Price Club 10 years later. Retail experts give a lot of attention to Senegal's formula for success. Offer a limited number of items, rely on high-volume sales, keep costs as low as possible, and don't spend money on advertising. But there's something that separated him from the competitors who employ similar strategies: the way he treated his employees. He believed in paying his employees well and offering them good benefit packages. Senegal believed that if you pay people well, you can get good people and good productivity. You also get employee loyalty. Costco has by far the lowest employee turnover rate in all of retailing. But Senegal's leadership style of adding value didn't end with the employee compensation. He went out of his way to show Costco workers that he cared about them. He maintained an open-door policy with everyone. He wore an employee name tag, was on a first-name basis with everyone, and made...
I want to have a realistic conversation about this too as well. Open door policies in 2026, is that realistic? And I do think when you are in a healthy organization, when you are dealing with people who know how to show up as adults, who are emotionally intelligent and are invested in being in a healthy work environment, yeah, you can show up and have a open door policy. But I will say, because we do, and I said this is one of the things that I wanted to parse with this series is, being a person of faith and operating in a toxic work environment and using the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership and really striking that balance. And unfortunately, I can say when you are in a toxic work environment, an open door policy is not a safe policy. But I had to think about, well, if you want to have an open door policy because you don't want to restrict your employees if they need access to you, what does that have to look like? And it literally has to look like you having a third party or recording all meetings. And that is where we are in the world today. And unfortunately, it can make the employees feel some kind of way. Like, oh, you don't trust me? Well, it's nothing personal. I think people are just going to have to get to the point where they just accept that. So I would tell anybody, in the workplace, especially if you know it's toxic, when people show you who they are, believe them and believe them the first time. Do not meet alone with people. Open door policies are great, but then they only work is if you're in a they only work if you're in a healthy work environment.
Be sure to visit every single Costco store at least once a year. No manager and no staff in any business feels very good if the boss is not interested enough to come and see them, said Senegal. The employees know that I want to say hello to them because I like them. The only real criticism of Senegal came from Wall Street. Analysts there believed that Senegal was too kind and generous to his people. They wanted him to pay employees less and squeeze them more. But Senegal wouldn't think of it. He believed that if you treat the employees and customers right, profits will follow. On Wall
That attitude that he's saying those investors have, that is the typical attitude that it doesn't just show up in the private sector, it shows up in the public sector as well. I think people today just feel like if you are being nice to employees, if you're giving, if you're doing too much, you're doing it wrong. They think, we are in a period of time where being a liar, stealing, cheating, just being a total person, like I will just say some of the things that I have seen in workplaces today I found to be very shocking and it definitely unethical. I think that's the age that we're in. The Bible told us that this will be the age that we're going to be in. And that is one of the purposes of this channel is that we understand that this is where we are. We have to make sure that we are grounded in our biblical principles. We have to make sure that we are keeping the law because we have to understand that Babylon, this is Babylon for real. And you have to decide, you have to pick a side. And a lot of times we don't know what that looks like outside of a biblical context. But when you want to talk about biblically, what does that look like? It looks like misconduct. It looks like unethical behavior. And so when you see these things, you have to make a decision on what side you're going to stand. And yeah, in standing, it's going to cost you. But I can tell you this, I got to look myself in the mirror. I'm not willing to compromise my integrity for a check. You have to ask yourself, are you willing to do the same?
Wall Street, he observed, they're in the business of making money between now and next Thursday. I don't say that with any bitterness, but we can't take that view. We want to build a company that will still be here 50 and 60 years from now. When it came down to it, Senegal was more focused on adding value to people by serving them than on serving himself. It's improper for one person to take credit when it takes so many people to build a successful organization, stated Senegal. He lived by the law of addition. He said, I just think that if you're going to try to run an organization that's very cost-conscious, then you can't have those disparities. Having an individual who is making 100 or 200 or 300 times more than the average person working on the floor is wrong. Senegal summed it up this way. This is not altruistic. This is good business. He could also say it's good leadership. Why do leaders lead? If you were to ask a lot of leaders, you might hear a variety of responses, believing a leader's job is to, be in charge, make the organization run smoothly, make money for the shareholders, build a great company, make the organization better than the competition, perhaps maybe winning is the cause. Does a leader's motive matter, or is it simply getting the job done that's important? What is the bottom line? I didn't give motives much thought until in the last 25 years. I vividly remember speaking on leadership to a group of government officials in a developing nation years ago and teaching that leaders add value by serving others. I could see that many of the audience members looked very uncomfortable as I talked about it. When I finished speaking and mentioned what I had observed to one of my hosts, he said, yes, I'm sure they did look uncomfortable. What you have to realize is that probably more than half of those people killed someone to obtain their current position of power. I've seen and heard a lot of things around the world, but that shocked me. In that moment, I realized that I should never take for granted why leaders lead and how they go about doing it. Many people view leadership.
And that is, while in some countries, they literally kill to get their position. There are people who are, while they may not be actually killing someone, they're killing people's careers to get positions. They're plotting on coworkers to get them fired so they can have their job. These are the kind of behaviors, that's what it shows up as here. And in some cases, you may even have some people who killed someone to get their position. But yeah, I think we're looking at the same dynamic just from through a different lens because today's world is just it is insane. People today are morally corrupt, and it is now. I would say you can look no further than the presidency to see that unethical behavior, misconduct, just blatant retaliation, harassment, discrimination. All of these things are just, for some reason, acceptable to us today. So this is again something that you have to examine in yourself, and that we do. 2 Corinthians 13:5. We examine ourselves, and we have to look at ourselves when we enter these situations and decide: am I showing up as a person of faith, or am I showing up as a reprobate?
The same way that they view success, hoping to go as far as they can to climb the ladder, to achieve the highest position possible for someone with their talent. But contrary to conventional thinking, I believe the bottom line in leadership isn't how far we advance ourselves, but how far we advance others. That is achieved by serving others and adding value to their lives. The interaction between every leader and follower is a relationship, and all relationships either add or subtract from a person's life. If you're a leader, then trust me, you're having either a positive or a negative impact on the people that you lead. How can you tell? There's one critical question. Are you making things better for the people who follow you? That's it. If you cannot answer that with an unhesitant yes and show some evidence that backs it up, then you may very well be a subtractor. Often subtractors don't realize that they are subtracting from others. I would say that 90% of all people who take more than they give do so unintentionally, and they don't recognize how negative their impact is on others. However, when leaders are subtractors and don't change their ways, it's only a matter of time before their impact on others goes from subtraction to division.
I think when this book is written, I think, and from his perspective, I think that is a belief that people want to have, and I don't think that I've turned into a negative Nancy. I do believe that there is good in the world, but I do think that we underestimate the level of wickedness that this world has, and that if you believe that people do not intentionally subtract, I think that is a mistake. I think it is a fallacy. I think that we need to, that's why the Bible says to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove, because you, at this point, you can't afford to run around and live by the honor system. Honor, as we know it, there is no honor in this system.
In contrast, 90% of all the people who add value to others do so intentionally. Why do I say that? Because human beings are naturally selfish. I'm selfish. Being an adder requires me to get out of my comfort zone every day and think about adding value to others. But that's what it takes to be a leader that others want to follow. And eventually, if you add value to others long enough, that value seems to multiply. The people who make the greatest difference seem to understand this. If you examine some of the people who won Nobel Peace Prizes, for example, Albert Schweitzer, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, you see leaders who were less interested in their position and more interested in their positive impact on others. If you read their writings or study their lives, you notice that they wanted to make things better for others. They didn't set out to receive the Nobel Prize. They desired to engage in noble service to their fellow human beings. A servant's mindset pervaded their thinking. Albert Einstein, who was awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1921, asserted, "Only a life lived in the service of others is worth living." He understood that great leadership meant great service. So how do leaders serve their people? Jim Senegal paid good wages and treated employees with respect. Martin Luther King Jr. led people to march for civil rights. Mother Teresa cared for the sick and established places where others could do the same. As a leader, your best place to be in an organization is where you can serve others best. The specifics will depend on vision, talent, opportunities, and organization. But the intention should always be the same, to add value. When you add value to people, you lift them up, help them advance, make them a part of something bigger than themselves, and assist them in becoming who they were made to be. Often their leader is the only person able to help them do those things. As I try to live out the law of addition, I follow 4 guidelines that help me add value to others. I believe we can add value to others when we, first, truly value others. Becoming a leader means to give up our right to think of ourselves first. We need to focus on other people. We must value people and demonstrate our caring in a way that our followers know it. I'm told that in American Sign Language, the sign for serving is to hold the hands out in front with palms up and to move them back and forth between the signer and the signee. And really, that is a good metaphor for the attitude that servant leaders should possess. They should be open, trusting, caring, offering their help, and willing to be vulnerable. Leaders who add value by serving believe in their people before the people believe in them, and they serve others before they are served. Number 2, we make ourselves more valuable to others. The whole idea of adding value to people depends on the idea that you have something of value to add. You can't give what you do not possess. What do you have to give others? Can you teach skills? Can you give opportunities? Can you offer insight and perspective gained through experience? None of these things comes without a price. If you have skills, you gain them through study and practice. If you have opportunities to give, you acquire them through hard work. If you possess wisdom, you gained it by intentionally evaluating the experiences that you've had. The more intentional you have been in growing personally, the more you have to offer. And the more that you continue to pursue personal growth, the more you will continue to have to offer. Number 3, know and relate to what others value. Inexperienced leaders are quick to lead before knowing anything about the people they intend to lead. But mature leaders listen, learn, and then lead. They listen to learn their people's stories. They find out about their hopes, their dreams. They become acquainted with their aspirations, and they pay attention to their emotions. From those things,
I think that is something that needs to happen, not just at work, but at home as well. Particularly parents, who you're leading your children, do you know what their dreams are? Do you know what they like, what they don't like? Do you take the time to get to know a person so that you can lead them properly? And that's what it looks when you can practice healthy leadership. It shows up that way at home and at work. And when you are in a healthy work environment, it is good to take the time to get to know your employees and hear their thoughts and know what they think about the job. Because a lot of times, you can find out directly why, if the company is failing, why it's failing, right from the staff. The staff, if you take the time and you show them that you care, they will tell you what the problem is. But most of the time, nobody ever asks the people who are actually doing the work what the problem is.
things they learn, who their people are, and what is valuable to them. And then they lead based upon what they've learned. When you do that, everybody wins: the organization, the leader, and the followers. Number 4, do things that God values. This final value may not be for you. If so, just skip it. But for me, it's non-negotiable. I believe that God desires us not only to treat people with respect.
I will say, I'm just going to go back to that. That's the case for this channel. If you are not interested in what God wants us to do, if you're not interested in a purpose-filled mission that is in alignment with the true and living God of the Bible, you just scroll on past, keep scrolling.
From those things, they learn who their people are and what is valuable to them. And then they lead based upon what they've learned. When you do that, everybody wins: the organization, the leader, and the followers. Number 4, do things that God values. This final value may not be for you. If so, just skip it. But for me, it's non-negotiable. I believe that God desires us not only to treat people with respect, but also to actively reach out to them and serve them. Scripture provides many examples and descriptions of how we should conduct ourselves. But here's my favorite, captured by Eugene Peterson's The Message. When he finally arrives, blazing in beauty, and all his angels with him, the Son of Man will take his place on his glorious throne. Then all the nations will be arranged before him, and he will sort the people out, much as a shepherd sorts out sheep and goats, putting sheep to his right and goats to his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Enter, you who are blessed by my Father. Take what's coming to you in this kingdom. I've been ready for you since the world's foundation, and here's why. I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was homeless, and you gave me a room. I was shivering, and you gave me clothes. I was sick, and you stopped to visit. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then those sheep are going to say, "Master, what are you talking about? When did we see you hungry and feed you, and thirsty and give you a drink? And when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?" Then the king will say, I'm telling you the solemn truth. Whenever you did one of these things to someone overlooked or ignored, that was me. You did it to me. That standard for my conduct influences everything I do, not just in my leadership, but especially my leadership. Because the more power I have, the greater my impact on others, for better or worse. And I always want to be someone who adds value to others, not takes it away. God values people so much that when we add value to them, he takes it personally. When you embrace the law of addition and become a leader who adds value by serving others in the end, the math doesn't add up. Why do I say that? Because when you give, you receive back even more than you gave. And what you give gets multiplied. I think of this as the servanthood surprise. Here's how I experienced it. I thought adding value to others was what I should do, but I got a heart that valued people. When we help others, we can see them as weak. When we try to fix others, we see them as broken. These attitudes make us feel superior. But when we serve others, we see them as valuable. That changes us. It becomes part of us. Valuing people is part of my identity. Someday I will no longer be leading others, but I will never stop serving them. That's who I am. That's what I do. Another servanthood surprise for me was this. I thought adding value to help others be successful was personal, but I found out that it was contagious. Adding value to others was a personal decision. It was something that came from within, and I decided I needed to practice it every day privately. What surprised me is that others joined me. When they saw the joy it brought me, they started adding value to others also. The people in my organizations live to add value to other people. Another servant surprise I received was that I thought significance would come late in my life, but significance came early. Early in my career, I made a decision to add value to others by training them and creating resources to help them. That required me to do two things: develop creativity and consistency. I needed to keep coming up with ideas, and I needed to keep producing. Little did I know that these two attributes would compound and contribute so much to my success. Another servanthood surprise I thought adding value would have little return, but I discovered that the return is amazing. General Norman Schwarzkopf said, "You cannot help someone else get up a hill without getting closer to the top yourself." When I started adding value to others, I had no idea how much it would help me and give me joy. I've gotten back so much more than I've given. When you serve others, their success becomes your success. When you add value to others by serving others, you know it will help people, but there's no telling what will happen or how far it will go. For example, one day in 2016, I was playing golf with Chris Hodges, a pastor and a community leader in Birmingham, Alabama, who has served on the board of my nonprofit organization for many years. Chris is a wonderful person and a good friend. Between holes, I asked Chris how I could serve him. Always humble and generous, Chris said he couldn't think of anything, so I pressed him and asked him what he was excited about. Immediately, he began talking about Highlands College, a school he was working to establish. "There's no way I can help you with that," I asked. "What's your greatest need?" Chris said he was trying to raise money for an endowment so that 1,000 students a year could receive scholarships to attend the college at no cost. My response was to give him a day. I told him I'd come to Birmingham at my own expense, spend time at a breakfast with top donors, and then speak at a one-day event for which he could sell tickets. Chris accepted, and we set it up. Now, here's the wonderful thing. That day did raise some money for the college, and it was successful enough that we decided to do it again the next year and every year since. But even better, it has also encouraged additional donors to give money too. From the time Chris and I had that conversation on a golf course in 2020, Chris has raised $100 million for scholarships. The little I added had been multiplied. And that's how the law of addition inevitably works. When leaders add value by serving others, the math doesn't add up. Everyone gets back more than they give. If you desire to add value by serving others, you'll become a better leader, and your people will achieve more, develop more loyalty, and have a better time getting things done than you ever thought possible. There's absolutely no downside to the law of addition. As I think about the law of addition, if people were to describe me, I think that they would probably attach me to this law more than any other. It's not because I think it's a more important law, but I really do live to add value to people. In fact, I've often said that Kind of my life statement is that I add value to leaders who multiply value to others, that I intentionally every day value people. Every day I think of ways to add value to people, look for ways to add value to people. I do things that add value to people, and I encourage people like you as I'm reading this book to you to intentionally add value to others, to be a plus in people's lives. Here is what I know. I've known a lot of unhappy, successful people. When I think of success, I just think about, things I do for myself, my family, my home, my stuff, my money, my career. Success is kind of like about me, but significance is about others. And although I've met a lot of unhappy, successful people, I've never met an unhappy person that added value intentionally to others and lived their life to help other people. That's amazing to me. You see, this incredible law of addition basically says, if we'll forget ourselves and think of others, if we'll continually, intentionally add value to them, it is really a life full of fulfillment. So when I read the chapter to you on this incredible law, I thought of myself and I thought, at 75, I'm finding so quickly that a life of adding value to people is a life that truly gives fulfillment and joy and a sense of significance that nothing else, I think, can ever be provided. So this is a beautiful law. It works in leadership, but I want to tell you, my friend, it also just works in life. Just become intentional in adding value to people and living out this law of addition, and I will promise you, your life will not someday improve. It will immediately improve. So let's go after that.
So that was the law of addition. That didn't take long to go through it all. And I would just say, in keeping with our theme here, right, and what we do, we think about how our lives are, or I would say the question, we question, do our lives add up? And are they in alignment with the will of the Most High? And so when I say do it, does it add up? When you count the cost, does it make sense? When you do the numbers, and what are you compromising? Are you compromising for good or for evil? For selfishness or for fulfillment? And just ask yourself these questions when you think about the law of addition. How are you showing up in the world? Are you adding or are you subtracting value? And so this will be the last chapter in the series that we cover on the Sabbath. We will start doing those again on Friday night. We will do the leadership, whatever leadership book that we're listening to, we'll listen to it on Friday night, and then we'll go from there. And the book club, this is it. We're listening to the books and we'll discuss them. So thank you for watching, and enjoy the rest of your Sabbath. Shalom.